More than 100,000 new cases of colorectal cancer will be diagnosed this year in the United States. In fact, not including skin cancers, colorectal cancer is the third most common cancer diagnosis in men and women, according to the American Cancer Society. But this cancer is preventable, treatable, and beatable, especially if it's caught early. Hello everyone, I'm Susie Lowry Hall. I'm Enlow's Community Outreach Manager, and I am here today with colorectal surgeon Michael Felk and gastroenterologist Frank Chang to talk about this topic in honor of National Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. But before we get started, please remember that the information we're about to share is not intended to be medical advice. If you have specific questions about your health, please talk to your provider. And as always, feel free to post your questions in the comments field. We'll do our best to answer as many as possible throughout the broadcast. And with that, let's get started. So thank you so much, Dr. Felk, for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So I'm going to go ahead and just take it back to the basics before I get into some of my big questions about colorectal cancer, and that is, what part of the body are we actually referencing right now when we talk about colorectal?
That's a good question. When we talk about the colon, what we're referring to is the lower GI tract. So at its most basic, you've got the mouth, the esophagus, the stomach, and then the small bowel. The colon starts in the lower right side of the abdomen. It goes up the right side, across, down the left, and then into the pelvis, and of course out from there into the commode.
Awesome. That's so great. So let's go ahead and talk about colorectal cancer. Specifically, who is at risk, most at risk, and then what should people be aware of?
You know, the people that are most at risk are those that have a known history of colon polyps or colon cancer, and folks that have first-degree relatives with colon polyps or colon cancer. And that means parents, brothers, sisters, and siblings. We also talk about children when we talk about risk, because if your parents have something going on, you should know about it. When I talk to folks about their risks, I always try to get a family history, but what we learn is that not everyone knows their family history. Sometimes they're adopted, other times it's just something that the family doesn't talk about. I always tell them to err on the side of assuming there's a family history instead of assuming that there isn't. One of the big discussions that we frequently have is that colon polyps and colon cancer are both risk factors. So when you say there's no one in my family that had colon cancer, colon polyps can be the precursors to cancer, and thankfully, typically that's what we find first, and we can get a polyp removed before it turns into a cancer, but any polyp could potentially be a cancer, so we treat that the same when it comes to risk from family.
If you would, please, can you explain exactly what is a polyp?
When we look into the colon, there's a very distinct look. When someone does a bowel prep and actually cleans everything out of the colon, it's actually a very clean-looking place. You can see some blood vessels and some shiny layer called the mucosa. If there is a bump in the mucosa, that is typically a polyp. They have a fairly distinct appearance. When you've done thousands of colonoscopies, you can't miss them. With the technology that we have now, we're actually able to see smaller and flatter polyps that in the past we might not have seen. The polyps are pretty distinct. That's why we take pictures, so that anyone else that looks at the report can also see what we were looking at before we removed it. But the polyp essentially is an area where there's some abnormal growth inside the colon. It's cells that are heaping up. I explain to patients all the time that they should think of their body like a production line. As things move down the production line, there are several checks and balances to make sure everything is going correctly. When the body is doing that the way it should, polyps will not grow. But when something is missed, that's when a polyp has a chance to grow and could potentially turn into a cancer.
Wow, thank you. That was really informative. I had no idea. So what are the signs of colorectal cancer then? What should we be looking out for?
At the most basic level, patients that experience any GI symptoms should be talking to their providers about whether they should be getting a colonoscopy. Some of the big ones are blood in the stool, blood on the tissue, blood in the toilet, abdominal pain, change in bowel habits, unexpected weight loss. I talk to a lot of patients that assume that the blood that they're seeing is from hemorrhoids. Most of the time it is. Oftentimes when we do a colonoscopy, it's not that we find the actual source of bleeding. We find something that we wouldn't have known was there if we didn't look, but the bleeding that the patient saw was actually from the hemorrhoids. Other times, the bleeding is not from the hemorrhoids at all, but it's from a polyp or even a tumor. So that's one of the big ones that we talk about, but I always emphasize blood per rectum, change in bowel habits, abdominal pain, unexpected weight loss.
Wow, that is really helpful. Thank you so much for that information. So then let's talk about prevention. So how can we lower our risk or prevent colorectal cancer?
To lower the risk, we really need to be very adherent to the screening guidelines. And the screening guidelines are presented by multiple different societies. Just recently, in 2018, the American Cancer Society actually lowered the starting age for a screening colonoscopy from 50 down to 45. To prevent this disease, and it's a disease that's very preventable, we need to do something to evaluate the colon. For years, we had tried to make sure everyone got their colonoscopy in a timely fashion, and despite our best efforts, we weren't doing that well. The new guidelines stress multiple options to look at the colon as a screening device, whether it's looking at the entire colon, looking at the left side of the colon, or doing some of the stool studies that we hear about. If we can keep ahead of the game, we can prevent these cancers. These polyps typically take 5 to 10 years to go from a visible polyp into a cancer. This makes this disease a perfect disease for screening because there is a visible precursor. The challenge is that visible precursor typically does not have any symptoms. I talk to patients, family, and friends all the time that tell me they don't need a colonoscopy because they're not having any trouble. And my point is, once you're having trouble, we may be later than we want to be.
So is there anything, when I think about people who have a history of colorectal cancer, I know that the screening is really important, but are there other behaviors that we should be engaging in to help keep the colon healthy and cancer-free?
Some of the risk factors, and these are not as direct as with lung cancer, where we talk about smoking causing lung cancer. These are more risk factors that have an indirect or a compiled effect that can lead to an increased risk of colon polyps or colon cancer. Sedentary lifestyle, obesity, alcohol consumption, smoking, lack of that physical activity, these are all risk factors that can contribute to colon cancer or colon polyps. They aren't necessarily a direct cause, but you can see that just by adhering to a healthy lifestyle, you're actually addressing all of those risk factors. And that, of course, is in addition to the risk factors we talked about earlier, family history and personal history. Those can never be ignored.
Something else I discovered when preparing for this discussion was that there is a coalition of about 76 organizations, including the American Cancer Society, and what they're seeing is that there's been a decline in cancer screenings due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Is that something that we're also seeing here in our clinics?
What we have found, and I think it's fairly intuitive, is that people are not going to the doctors as much as they were before the pandemic. People that are sick are showing up at the office or in the emergency department, but people that are doing well have concerns about exposure. Therefore, we know we are falling behind with regard to screening colonoscopies. What is the effect of that? Well, even without symptoms, as someone falls behind on their screening colonoscopy, the chances that they could have a polyp that we're missing, or a tumor that we're missing, or a polyp that's getting ready to transition into a tumor are much higher.
This has all been really great information, and before I move on to our next guest, I first want to just thank you for all the work that you do and for all the lives you save with all the great work that you're providing for our community. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us before we move on today?
Yeah, I really want to accept your thank you, but I can't because it's a team effort. This involves such a great number of people, so many participants that are looking to help patients have a better outcome, whether it's the person checking a patient in at the front desk, or the GI tech that's helping us get through that colonoscopy, the OR tech that's so critical to the procedure that's being done. This is not something that we do alone as physicians, and we rely on a big team. And I really always emphasize to patients and staff that they need to do everything they can to spread the word so that people are educated about when to get a colonoscopy and why to get a colonoscopy. I have close friends and family that frequently tell me, as I mentioned before, they don't need that colonoscopy because they're just doing fine, and we know that's not the case. 45 is the new 50. This is a disease that is treatable and beatable. We just have to stay ahead of it.
I couldn't agree more. I agree, and you're right. Thank you to the team that makes it possible. So thank you so much for joining us.
It's been my pleasure.
My next guest is Dr. Chang.
So thank you, Dr. Chang, for joining us today.
Thank you, Susie, for having me.
So we just talked with Dr. Felk, who gave us some information about risk factors, signs and symptoms, and prevention when we consider colorectal cancer. So I'd like to go ahead and ask you to tell us a little bit more about screenings. When should we start talking to our doctor about that?
Previously, we started screening at the age of 50. However, we have seen increasing colon cancer under 40. So American Cancer Society has started at the age of 45, as well as many of the national societies are moving towards the age of 45. If you have a family history with first degree relative with colon cancer, you want to start 10 years earlier than that family member or at the age of 40, whichever is earlier.
That's remarkable. So if I hear you right, you're saying that the recommendation is 45, the age 45, unless you have a family history, meaning that if you have a family history that has a diagnosis, let's say at 40, then you would want to get yourself screened at 30, 10 years prior. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, that's great. And then do you just ask your doctor for that test, or is that something that's part of your regular care?
Usually the primary care provider referred to our office, and from there we schedule for a colonoscopy. We can do open access if there's not too many medical problems. Now, if there is quite a few chronic medical problems, then we have them come to the office and we would go over the anticoagulation, antiplatelets, or any other medical conditions. And from there we schedule for the colonoscopy here.
Okay, great. So what are our screening options?
Colonoscopy is our standard test that we use. Not only does it provide diagnostic, be able to find the polyp and remove the polyp during the procedure, but the other testing that we're able to do is Cologuard and a fecal cold blood test, virtual colonoscopy. However, those other tests, when they do detect polyps, then we go back to the colonoscopy where we have to go back in and remove those polyps here.
It's really interesting. Are those other two screening options you discussed, are those also done in your clinic, or are those something that people usually take home?
So those are stool testing that both the primary care and our office are able to administer for the patient, and they can go home and get that done once they get it from the labs.
My next question is about the colonoscopy procedure itself. You'd mentioned that there's some prep that goes along with that, but then what does the whole experience kind of look like?
The colonoscopy itself, the bowel prep, we have many different bowel preps, but typically the patient would have to pick up their bowel prep at the pharmacy, and from there they would have more of a split bowel prep to go the night before. And from there, they need an escort to take them home, and they want to schedule that either through outpatient surgery center or at the main hospital here. And from there, we typically do a pre-call and give them instructions for the bowel prep. And after the procedure, we also give them a post-call. And after the procedure, I also talk to them as well.
Before we sign off, I'd love for you to share some of the big news about the great work that you and your team are doing.
I couldn't agree more. Colon cancer is very preventable and treatable disease. Out of 4,500 hospitals in the United States, our department is ranked in the top 100. And on top of that, we were recently recognized by the American Society of Gastrointestinal Endoscopy Unit Recognition Award, which means that our batting average for finding GI problems is at the national rate or higher. And I understand that COVID has deterred some patients to come back to us, but I do encourage that this is a very important exam that you don't want to miss out, and this is a very preventable and beatable disease.
Thanks again for both of our doctors for joining us today, and thank you for tuning in. Please join me next month when we talk about hospice care and advanced directives. Take care.